And we are back with part 4 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life version, TLV. And I just did a quick recapping of chapters 2 to chapter 5. That was a really short version of it, but we had read through all of the chapters. So you've got the long version of it too. But we need to move on to chapter 6 at this point. And this is the ark coming into Jerusalem. Now David again gathered all the chosen men of Israel, 30,000. Then David and all the people who were with him arose and set out from Baal Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the very name of Adonai Sabaoth, who is enthroned between the cherubim. So they loaded the ark of God on a new cart and carried it out of the house of Abinadab that was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, Abinadab's sons, drove the new cart as they brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill, with the ark of God, and Ahio was walking in front of the ark. Meanwhile, David and the whole house of Israel were celebrating before Adonai with all kinds of instruments made of cypress wood, with harps, lyres, tambourines, three-stringed instruments, and cymbals. But when they reached the threshing floor of Nashon, Uzzah reached out to the ark of God and grasped it, for the oxen had stumbled. Then the anger of Adonai was kindled against Uzzah, and God struck him down there for his irreverence, so that he died there beside the ark of God. And I'm going to explain a little bit of that later, why that was done, and so you'll understand why Uzzah was struck dead. And David was upset because of Adonai's outburst against Uzzah, and that place is called Perez Uzzah to this day. So David was frightened of Adonai that day. Then he said, "How can the ark of Adonai come to me?" David was unwilling to move the ark of Adonai to him, to the city of David. Instead, David diverted it to the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite. So the ark of Adonai remained in the house of Obed-Edom, the Gittite, 3 months. Meanwhile, Adonai blessed Obed-Edom and his entire household. Then it was reported to King David, saying, "Adonai has blessed the house of Obed-Edom and all that belongs to him because of the ark of God." So David went and brought the ark of God up from the house of Obed-Edom to the city of David with joy. Now when the bearers of the ark of Adonai had gone 6 paces, he sacrificed an ox and a fatling. Meanwhile, David was dancing before Adonai with all his might while he was wearing a linen ephod. So David and the entire house of Israel brought up the ark of Adonai was shouting, and with the sound of the shofar. But as the ark of Adonai entered the city of David, Saul's daughter Michal looked out the window and saw King David leaping and dancing before Adonai, so she despised him in her heart. They brought in the ark of Adonai and set it in its place in the midst of the tent that David had pitched for it. Then David offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings before Adonai. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and fellowship of offerings, he blessed the people in the name of Adonai Sabaoth. Then he distributed to all the people, to the whole multitude of Israel, men and women alike, to everyone a loaf of bread, a cake made in a pan, and a raisin cake. Then all the people departed, each to his home. David returned to bless his own household, but Saul's daughter Michal came out to meet David and said, "How the king of Israel distinguished himself today, when he uncovered himself today in the eyes of the slave girls of his subjects, as any vulgar fellow would shamelessly uncover himself." "It was before Adonai," David said to Michal, "who chose me instead of your father and all his household, appointing me ruler over the people of Adonai, over Israel. So I danced before Adonai and will dishonor myself even more than this, and will be low in my own eyes. Yet in the eyes of the slave girls whom you mention, I will be honored." So Saul's daughter Michal had no children to the day of her death. So that was a very interesting exchange. So in this chapter, we see Peril with moving the ark, and the ark is brought to Jerusalem. David gathers together all the chosen men in order to do this. However, when we go back in time, when the ark was constructed, why was the Lord so angry with Uzzah? Because the ark was holy and could not be touched by just anyone, and anyone just touching it would die. And God gave that instruction to Moses. So that had been forgotten through the ages there. There were specific instructions on how to care for the ark of God and in transporting it as well. So when they just decided, oh, we're gonna bring the ark into the house of David, there was no thought really put into it. And so Uzzah touches the ark, and he put forth his hand to the ark of God, took hold of it, and this was careless. It was a careless act in doing this. It was probably more out of ignorance and not iniquity and disobedience, because um, he probably did not know, is my guess. But there was still a price to pay for not doing what God had instructed, and this was the law. Another point to consider is that David sought 30,000 chosen men of Israel with regards to the ark of God, and the passages do not say that he consulted God on this matter at all, which is one of the times that David did not. And David usually consulted God on almost everything. The times that he doesn't is the times that there's problems, as we see. Up to this point, David consulted with God on pretty much everything, and he had a very close walk with God, and as a result had been blessed by God. There were some times when David acted on his own and did not consult with God, and these were the times usually that trouble was brought for him, as with Bathsheba, as we're going to see, and also in the time that he had Israel numbered, which we're going to see. And he had to repent for all of this, for all of these times. In these passages leading up to the moving of the ark of God, we do not read anywhere that God instructed him on the moving of the ark of God and bringing it to the city from where it was being safely kept. The problem was how it was transported and that it was touched, which God had given detailed instructions on this. Um, so when the ark was finally transported to the city, it had then been done properly and without any mishap, and the home of Obed Edom was blessed by God for the 3 months that it was there. Now, to understand the importance of the ark of God and what transpired here, we need to actually go back and to when God clearly instructed Moses on all of this, and he had faithfully passed on the word of God concerning the ark, that the Levite priests clearly knew the instructions for care and for transport of the ark as God chose for them this task. So, when we go back, and I'm not going to read all of this, in Exodus chapter 25, 8 through 22, we see how specifically God gave instructions on how the ark was to be constructed, including all the materials, exactly the measurements, and where God would come to dwell with them in between the cherubim. So that is so important. And then we go on in Numbers, and you can read this on your own. Then we go to Numbers 4, verses 5 to 20, how the care of the ark was to take place, how it was to be covered, how it was to be transported. So it was very specific instructions. So this is why he struck Uzzah dead. So it had been very well known for the children of Israel. And we often wonder, when we read, um,
in 1 Samuel chapter 6, when the Philistines actually stole the Ark of the Covenant, why God was a little bit easier on them. Well, not so much, because there was a lot of hazard that came with them having possession of it, but he was harsher on the children of Israel. But they had clear instructions. The the Philistines did not. So he actually had some mercy when it came to ignorance. Um, so as we go back to that story with the Philistines, it was different. And this actually happened in, we can go back to 1 Samuel chapters 5 to 6, when the Philistines has stolen the ark of God, and they did not have a good experience as a result. Though God did deal with them and plague them to the point that they decided to send it back, because it was a hazard for them to have it in their possession. um, and we see how it was returned. And the instructions came from actually the Philistine priests and the diviners, who gave their leaders specific instructions. So it's not surprising to see that they returned it on a new cart and drawn by two cows. The Philistines did not possess the law, so they did not know at all how God instructed the ark to be carried and cared for. And so they didn't know that they needed a Kohathite priest. Um, the Kohathites were a branch of the Levites. We have the Gershonites, we had the Kohathites, and we had the Merarites, and each of them had um, specific duties for the care of the tabernacle and the priestly duties. And the Kohathites were the ones that were to be caring for the Ark of the Covenant and the transporting of the covenant. So it was specifically them that needed to go through. So the method of transporting the ark provided them with a test. The Philistines, it was a test to see whether it was just bad luck on their part, or this was truly the hand of God. And as they found out, it was truly the hand of God. Um, so when we look at what happened with Uzzah, um, this, they had failed to pass on this knowledge. And the problem came when Israel imitated the haphazard way of transporting the Ark of God rather than obeying God's instructions given in the law. At this point, the ark had not been carried for many years, and it had been in the home of Abinadab for many years. And when the ark of God was carried, it was usually hidden under a large veil made of skins and blue cloth, always carefully concealed even from the eyes of the priests and the Levites who carried it. God spoke to Moses from between the two cherubim on the ark's cover. When at rest, the tabernacle was set up, and the holy ark was placed in it under the veil of the covering, the staves of it crossing the middle sidebars to hold it up off the ground. The ark was holy, and anyone who touched it would die, as what happened with Uzzah. By using poles, men could transport the ark without touching the ark itself. The men walked in step with each other, giving stability, and putting it on an ox cart provided no real stability. The error that was made with David, Uzzah, and those who involved with the first attempt to transport the ark of God was that they lost the awe and reverence that they should have had, and it should have been present for the holiness of God. That also they clearly forgotten God's instructions, and that was set down in law for the care and transport of the ark of God. So they had forgotten that, and some of them lost their lives. And some that had looked into the ark when it was returned by the Philistines, they were also struck down. So David is first angry with what happened to Uzzah, and then he becomes fearful. David's fear is well founded and healthy. God does want to be near his people to bless them, but the only way for this to happen was to approach him in the way that he prescribed it. It was the safe way that could be done. His presence is associated with the ark. Men could draw near to him, but not too near. They could not touch the ark or they would die. So the only way the ark could be moved was to do it the way God instructed by the Kohathites, who were to carry the ark by its poles placed through the rings of the ark. And David was assured that the nearness of the ark was a blessing, but it must be brought into Jerusalem in accordance with God's instruction. So David assembled the people and also commissioned the sons of Kohath to carry it. And then it was done according to the way God had instructed them to carry it. And then there was no mishap. So they first carried it 6 steps and then made a sacrifice. And you can imagine it must have been a very first tense 6 steps after what had happened the first time and what happened to Uzzah. But as they continued, their courage and joy must have also increased, and soon there was great celebration because of it, and the ark was brought into the holy city. So that is important, and an important lesson also on how instructions and also how history absolutely needs to be passed down, because this had not been passed on and done appropriately. Uzzah lost his life. Had he known, he probably wouldn't have done what he well, actually they wouldn't have transported it in that manner. But they actually learned a very valuable lesson in doing it the way God instructed and going back to those specific instructions because they were given specifically for a reason. So that is chapter 6, and we're going to go on to chapter 7. Adonai's promise to David. Now it came about when the king lived in his palace and Adonai had granted him rest from all his enemies around him, that the king said to the prophet Nathan, "See now, I am living in a house of cedar, yet the ark of God remains within curtains. Go do all that is in your heart," Nathan said to the king, "for Adonai is with you." But it came to pass the same night that the word of Adonai came to Nathan, saying, "Go, tell my servant David, thus says Adonai, are you to build me a house for me to dwell in? Since the day that I brought up the children of Israel from Egypt to this day, I have not dwelt in a house, but have been moving about in a tent, even in a tabernacle. In all my journeying among all the children of Israel, did I ever speak a word to any of the tribes of Israel, whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, saying, Why have you not built me a house of cedar? So now thus you shall say to my servant David, Thus says Adonai Sabaoth, I took you from the pasture, from following the sheep, to be ruler over my people, over Israel. I have been with you wherever you went, and have cut off all your enemies from before you, and I will make your name as great as the greatest on earth. I will also set up a place for my people Israel, and will plant them, so they may dwell in their own place and not be disturbed again. Nor will the children of wickedness afflict them any more as in the past, since that since the day that I commanded judges to be over my people Israel. So I will give you rest from all your enemies. Moreover, Adonai declares to you that Adonai will make a house for you when your days are done and you sleep with your fathers. I will raise up your seed who will come forth from you after you, and I will establish his kingdom. He will build a house for my name, and I will establish his royal throne forever. I will be a father to him, and he will be a son to me. If he commits iniquity, I will correct him with the rod of men and with the strokes from sons of men. Yet my loving kindness will not be withdrawn from him, as I withdrew it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. So your house and your kingship will be secure forever before you. Your throne will be established forever. Just so Nathan spoke all these words and all this vision to David. And we talked about this before, that Adonai was telling David he was not going to be building him a house. But Solomon, his son, would be able to build the temple. Then King David went in and sat before Adonai and said, Who am I, my lord Adonai, and what is my family that you have brought me this far? Yet this was a small thing in your eyes, Adonai, my lord, for you have spoken also of your servant's house for the distant future. This is a revelation for humanity, my lord Adonai. What more can David add in speaking to you? For you already know your servant, my Lord Adonai. For the sake of your word and according to your own heart, you have done everything great, revealing this to your servant. Therefore you are great, my Lord Adonai, for there is none like you, and there is no other God besides you, as we all have heard with our ears. What one nation on earth is like your people, like Israel, whom God went to redeem for himself as a people, to make for himself a name, to do for you a great thing and awesome deeds for your land before your people, whom you redeemed for yourself from Egypt, driving out nations and their gods. So you established for yourself your people Israel as your very own people forever, and you, Adonai, have become their God. So now, my Lord Adonai, confirm the words that you have spoken concerning your servant and his house forever, and do as you have promised. Let your name be magnified forever by saying, Adonai Sabaoth is God over Israel. May the house of your servant David be established before you. For you, Adonai Sabaoth, God of Israel, have made a revelation to your servant, saying, I will build you a house. Therefore your servant has found his heart to pray this prayer to you. So now, my Lord Adonai, you alone are God, and your words are true, and you have promised your servant this good thing. So now let it please you to bless the house of your servant, to continue forever before you. For you, my Lord Adonai, have spoken, and with your blessing your servant's house will be blessed forever. And that is the end of chapter 7. I'm going to come back and do a little recap on that, and then we're going to move into chapter 8.